Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Earth Day Everyday podcast, where we aim to spotlight exemplary activists, policymakers, and changemakers in the field of sustainability and climate change. I'm your host, Aryan Doshi, and today we are so lucky to have Rick with us. Rick is the author of Climate Change in an Aging Society, a longstanding member of the Elders Action Climate Network, and board chair of Grays Green, a national conservation corp, among so many other things. Rick, it is so wonderful to have you with us today.
Delighted to be here.
Awesome. So I guess let's just get started. Like, how did you sort of come about the field of climate and environmental sustainability, and what brought you along?
I guess I would have to start in 1960 when I was 15 years old. I was born in 1945, so I'm 79 years old today. In 1960, I got my award as an Eagle Scout of the Boy
Wow.
Scouts of America.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even at an early age, I was interested in nature. I
Yeah.
got the Nature Merit Badge and all these other kind of
Yeah.
things. But then I kind of went to sleep. I went to college. I was very fortunate. I was able to go to Yale and then got a PhD from Columbia. And, I had to earn a living. So I got interested in aging. Didn't really know much about it. I wasn't very old at the time. But by the time I was uh, 30, I was very much involved in aging issues, but I
Yeah.
wasn't much involved in climate issues.
Yeah.
I really only got actively involved in climate issues when I moved here to the Bay Area in 2020, right in the middle of COVID,
Okay. Yeah.
which I got while I was moving, of course, to be near my children, son and daughter, now age 36 and age 40,
Yeah.
daughter. And I realized that my grandchildren, first two, now three, are going
Yeah.
to be living in a world, they're going to be inheriting a world that's in a mess.
Yeah.
And that people like me, my age, are really the ones responsible because we're the ones who are going on airplane flights and using up all fossil fuels and everything else. So I said to myself and to other people, and I think I've added you to my climate change newsletter, the message is very simple. It's not too late and you're not too old.
For sure.
That's it. That's my
Yeah.
story. Yeah, it's not too late for me and I'm not too old to make my contribution.
Yeah,
That's it.
and that's an amazing story. I think a lot of times people approach the climate with like this sort of like mindset of I'm one person and how can one person make an impact? And
That's
but if you
right.
just think about it from like a broader perspective, right? When we think about the waste ending up on our beaches, if we sort of switch to instead of, plastic spoons to recyclable spoons, we start off with one person but scale out, then it really does make an impact in terms of, looking at our oceans, looking at our ecosystems, but it starts off with one and then expanding. So I guess how do you sort of envision or convey to people that you as one individual, you can still have an impact?
Well, one of my heroes is a guy named Bill McKibben, who founded Third Act, which is an organization for elders to try to
Yeah.
get involved. And he likes to say, and Rebecca Solnit, who's another very important writer on this subject,
Yeah.
likes to say, it's true that if you say, I'm just one person, what can just one person do? Well, the answer is don't be just one person. Connect
Exactly.
with others, join
Yeah.
a group.
Yeah.
Attend activities with others, go on demonstrations.
For
For example, today is Saturday, but next Friday I'll be in Palo Alto, where
Wow.
I go every Friday. I didn't go yesterday because yesterday was the 55th wedding anniversary for me and my wife.
Wow, congratulations.
So thank you.
Yeah.
But every Friday, except for yesterday, I show up in Palo Alto where we have people of all ages doing part of what is called Fridays for Future.
Yeah.
And this is an activity that was launched uh, by a climate activist, a young woman,
Yeah.
and we're trying to do the same thing right there locally. So the
Yeah.
motto is think globally, act locally.
Yeah.
And if we don't do that, then we're just expecting other people will solve
For
the problem.
sure. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
And can you talk a little bit about, you're talking about this intergenerational sort of term in terms of like bridging the youth and the elder people together. Can you talk about that and like why you sort of created the Elders Action Climate Network and how that sort of came about?
Well, I didn't create Elders Climate Action. That was launched by John Sorensen and Sue Sorensen,
Hmm.
who live in where's that town near? I've forgotten the name of it. Here in Northern California.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway, it's been around for 10 or 12 years now, and uh, they have realized that they need to be, as elders, need to be connected with young people because young people are going to be inheriting the mess that we have made.
for sure. Yeah,
That's number one. But number two, uh, young people will approach things in a slightly different way than older people will.
yeah,
And the older people may sometimes say, well, we can't do this. It's been tried before and it didn't
yeah,
work. But the young people are more likely to say, well, let's try it again, or let's try it for the first time, even if
yeah,
it's never been done before.
for sure.
Let's do it. And one good thing about having young people work with old people is that the old people, if they can sometimes keep their mouth shut a little bit and not give advice or not talk too much, and I'm probably talking too much
No,
now,
no, no.
you called me up. Um, they need to listen to what the young people hope for, and also what the young people are afraid of. And when you talk to the young people, you hear that young people often hope that we can find a solution to the climate problem, but they're fearful that it won't be done in time.
Yeah,
So right now it's 2024. We haven't got too many years left to implement it. And that's a
exactly. Yeah,
source of fear. But fear is okay as long as it mobilizes you to act. And
exactly.
action is the antidote to anxiety.
Wow.
3A. Action is the
Yeah,
antidote
antidote,
to
exactly.
anxiety. That's an important point.
Yeah,
And I think that that's one reason for intergenerational collaboration.
for sure.
Very
And
important.
yeah. And then can you talk about like, I guess when we're thinking of this idea of a movement, right? When we're thinking about this idea of a movement, it's joining people together and coming to
Right.
this, I guess, unanimous sort of conclusion, decision, and merging different perspectives, merging different ideas together so that we're able to sort of achieve change. I think a lot of the times, like organizations like Third Act that you're talking about, a big part of what they do is creating a movement, joining people together because only if you have so many different voices are you able to sort of create that vision. So can you just talk about how do people, like, even in their local communities, how do they work together and really create that movement? Like what goes on to make that
Yeah.
happen?
Um, One of the things that Elders Climate Action does is to encourage local initiatives and recognize that, if you're based in the San Francisco Bay Area, as both you and I are,
Yeah,
Ariane, you live in Cupertino, I think, and I live in San Mateo. We got to make sure that we reach out to people in Los Angeles,
for
uh,
sure.
people in Santa Barbara, just within the state of California,
Mm,
San Diego. But then we need to be concerned with people in Colorado and in
yeah,
New York. And so we're trying to work with people, and Elders Climate Action is a national organization,
yeah,
originated in California, but it's national. And there are chapters now in many, many states around the country. So
yeah,
that's an important dimension. Encourage people to set up their own group and meet locally and work locally, maybe in climate cafes,
yeah,
maybe with demonstrations,
for sure.
maybe with connection with schools.
Mhm.
For example, the Third Act has done work with what they call seniors to seniors, in which senior, that is, elders, get connected with high school seniors to make
Wow.
sure that when
Yeah.
they turn 18, I hope you're going to be voting when you turn 18, 17 now. We want to make sure that many states around this country, you can register to vote even if you're not yet 18. And
Yeah,
when you are 18, we want to see you at the polls.
for
So
sure.
those are some examples of concrete actions that not just I am doing, but others are doing. And finally, I'll just mention I have a newsletter called Climate Action in an Aging Society. I just added you to the list. I have
Yeah,
about
thank you
200
so
people
much.
now who get it every week.
Wow.
And one of the things I try to focus on is what can I do? What can one person do?
Yeah,
Well, okay, you can do it in your own household,
yeah,
recycling, things like that, reducing energy waste.
for
Those
sure.
are things you can do, but you can share with other people what you found that works and what you found that doesn't work.
Right.
Both are important.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess you're talking about, sustainability, like how one person can make a difference. I think oftentimes when people approach I guess the climate situation, one thing that they sort of look at is like monetary gain. Like when you think about, fossil fuels, oftentimes that could be a cheaper source compared to renewable sources of energy. And so how do we sort of stray people away from that thinking and really incentivize them? I think incentivization is a big part of ultimately being able to realize climate. And people today, they oftentimes, right, they'll go for the cheaper source that they feel will be able to support their families. But how do we sort of convey that message that we need to transition from where we're at today to where we need to be and give people,
That's
yeah,
that's the right way to put it. You've put it exactly the right way. Incentives can be a matter of motivation to act or motivation not to act.
yeah,
And I'll give you an example.
mhm,
We're not, don't try to say, if you think bicycling is a good thing, it is, but
yeah,
don't try and sell bicycling to somebody who's an amputee.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
EVs, electric vehicles, are a good thing. Why don't I have an electric vehicle? Because I usually keep a car for 10, 15 years. My
yeah,
car is only 10 years old. I hate buying new cars. But
yeah,
even if I did, I live in a I live right now. You're interviewing me in a place. I'm gonna move myself around here so you can see where I live.
yeah.
I'm gonna look out the window here.
Awesome.
I
Wow.
live in they took down a lot of the trees, unfortunately, but I live in a multi unit housing complex, a condo, and we can't hook up an electric vehicle to my
Yeah.
particular place.
Mhm.
It doesn't work that way. So I'm probably not going to be getting an EV anytime soon, but
Yeah.
I've already completely replaced the windows with thermal
Wow.
windows, which
Yeah.
cost thousands of dollars to do that. Already got an induction cooktop in the kitchen,
Yeah.
a redo of our whole kitchen. So you focus on things that people can do, not the things that people can't do. And don't assume that everybody is going to be able to, let's say, stocks, investments. I happen to have, I'm an old guy, so I happen to have a certain number of investments and mutual funds. So I look to see, okay, which mutual funds can avoid fossil fuels. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who don't have mutual funds.
Yeah.
So we can't talk to them about,
Yeah.
investments.
For
We
sure.
talk to people with speak to people in accordance with what they can do and what they can understand. Talk
Yeah.
to them in a language that they can. Now, if a person says, well, I haven't got a lot of money, I got to watch my pennies. Okay, well, some things you can save money
Yeah.
on some of the things. You don't have to spend money, you can save it. And we need to talk to them in ways that they can say yes to. That's the most
For sure.
important point
Yeah.
about motivation. Get them to say yes.
Yeah. And I think what you said there about focusing on the things you can do, right, rather than can't do, like even when you think about different forms of energy, obviously solar is not going to be applicable to everyone, but in the areas where possibly you could make good use of it and it is cheap, then maybe you use that. Or where areas
Right.
where there is a lot of wind, I think South Dakota, for example, right?
That's
Capitalize
right.
on that. So it's just like capitalizing on what you have rather than you don't. I think that's a super important point.
It's
I
very
guess
important.
I guess one more thing I also wanted to get sort of like your feedback insight on is there's been this idea of something called like a circular economy, right? Where
Yep.
after you use a product, it can be recycled or regenerated, back into the economy for some sort of a different use. And so the idea is you take any random objects like a sofa or in an office, like a desk, they all have like carbon footprints behind them, right? They require like a lot of
Do
water, a lot
have
of
a
light.
carbon history.
Exactly. They have a carbon history to create them. And so the idea is, let's say you have like a tear or a rip in one of them. How can you sort of, rather than throwing it away, put it in the hands of another person and sort of create some sort of a system where both people are benefited? Because I think this idea of circular economy has been around for a while
It
and
has
it
been.
can help to prevent waste, but we haven't really seen society move so much towards that. And so for me, it's sort of like what sort of impeded the implementation of circular economy in today's society. And I think it goes back to incentivization, right? So what do you think that we can maybe do to take us from linear, where it's like take, make, waste, after you use it, right? You discard
Yep.
it, it doesn't have like a life cycle, to really extend the life cycle of products today. Because when we're thinking about waste, it's not just about closing the food waste loop, it's also closing the carbon loop, finding to reuse everything that is in our hands on a daily basis, and that can help our oceans, right? Help the marine systems, help the turtles who are being affected by plastic in the ocean. And so, what do you think we can sort of do to take us from linear to circular? Because that also creates a movement, but how do we get like that spark
You've
to go
raised all the right questions.
there?
And with regard to the circular economy, the first thing is I don't remember the name of the woman who created it, but it was a great insight because it's a short phrase.
Yeah,
It's a very short phrase, circular economy. Once people hear it, they don't know what it is, but
yeah,
as soon as they hear what it is, they say, "Oh, what a good idea."
yeah,
That's good. That's a good first step. But the next step is to show them examples in their own local area.
for sure.
Now, you live in Cupertino. I
Yeah,
live in San Mateo.
yeah,
Right between us are places like uh, Palo Alto and Menlo Park. It
yeah.
turns out that both those towns, and if people hear this all around the country, it's okay. You don't have to live in California to we're talking about. Uh, there are stores that have used merchandise, used clothing.
Yeah,
They're often done by charities
yeah,
who the money that they earn from these things. So people, there's plenty of rich people in Palo Alto, more than the town that I live in, but um, when they're through with their fancy clothes, they don't throw them away. They donate them to this
yeah.
basically recycling store.
Mhm.
So recycling doesn't just mean what you do with products, waste products from your
Yeah,
kitchen or something
yeah,
like that. It also refers to clothing and to household objects that are done by charitable organizations. But these are good places to go. You can often get fantastic bargains there.
yeah,
So
yeah,
what I'm afraid these groups are not doing is they're not doing enough advertising of
yeah.
that these are opportunities for
For
people.
sure. No, I think you were just talking about like fashion. I just remember seeing something where like in Chile, I think they have like a lot of like waste in terms of like the fashion industry, all these clothes
Yes,
that just end
fashion is
up,
a
right? And they
challenge.
actually organize like a runway or like a model show with people taking these items that are in the landfills and just making like complete outfits and costumes out of them. So I
Oh,
think,
I love that idea.
yeah,
And by the way, the thing that you just said, taking the landfill and making it into fashion items, that's the kind of thing that could become a media story. And
yeah,
I'm a big believer in media attention.
yeah,
Like to see more attention to these success stories.
yeah,
And media sometimes will go for that. Sure, they
yeah,
go for problems, but
for
they
sure.
also go for
The
interesting,
success. Yeah.
offbeat things. I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
bringing you talking about the media, how do we sort of, yes, the media can be used for a positive angle as well, and I think currently it is being geared towards that for climate change, but how do we sort of get the media to focus on a lot of times like the people of, I like to say like people of today and right now, because I think what we're seeing is we're living in California, both of us, right? And we have like sun, we have beautiful weather. And so oftentimes the thought or notion of climate change, it's like it seems like a distant thought in the future, right? Because of what we have right now. But for that farmer living in another place where, their crops can be the difference between producing for their families and also producing for us as consumers as well. How do
Yes.
we sort of change and alter that narrative to focus on the people of today and right now, the people who are being directly impacted, because ultimately, eventually, it probably will be us as well facing more of a brunt, and we are facing more of a brunt. Maybe not as much as other places, other fields, but how do we sort of shape that story?
Well, in a way, you gave the answer. You gave the example of wind in North Dakota or South Dakota,
Yeah, yeah,
but I could have given the example of wind in Texas.
yeah.
People don't know that Texas is one of the biggest wind producers
Wow.
in this whole country
Yeah.
because they think Texas just means oil. It does,
Oil.
and they're going to have to learn to put that down or avoid it as much as possible. But we also want to look at the fact that even in a red state, let's call it like Texas, they're going ahead with wind production
Yeah.
uh, because it's cheaper, because it's
Yeah.
economically efficient. And I think we want to call attention to that kind of
Yeah.
thing
Mhm.
as I just did with you and
Yeah.
with our viewers, because that way people can say, well, if you can do it even in Texas, why can't we do it
Right.
here in
Yeah.
Colorado or
Yeah.
in Arkansas or
Yeah.
New Jersey or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the kind of approach that we want to take.
Yeah.
And if we do, I think we're already seeing the price of renewable energy.
Yeah.
Solar panels has dropped by 80 or 90% in the
Yeah.
last decade.
Yeah.
So people need to hear about the success stories
Yeah,
and
exactly. I think a
not
lot of
just
the times also looking at the government and legislation, there tends to be a focus on, you know, gearing target or gearing climate change towards being a focus of one political party rather than another. But so many times there is like bipartisan agreement from both parties
right.
to solve the climate crisis and passing legislation to do that.
Yeah.
So how do we sort of like implement that into the media as well in terms of focusing on, the bipartisan focus that in many ways both parties have shown blue state, red state, like you were saying. How do we sort of target or channel that shift?
I think we need to be focusing on the areas that people can agree on.
For sure.
And if people ridicule something like recycling or ridicule EVs,
Hmm.
um, the response has to be, we're just trying to save people money.
Yeah.
I used to work for AARP in Washington, and
Wow.
AARP has a third Democrats, a third Republicans, and a
Yeah.
third independents
Hmm.
nationally. California AARP is the biggest state AARP chapter in the country. They
Wow.
bought into and accepted the idea that we need to focus on climate change, but
Yeah.
we don't always use the word climate change.
Yeah.
Instead, we talk about how you can reduce your energy costs.
Yeah.
How can you have a more livable community?
For
Uh,
sure.
things of that kind.
Yeah.
And when we approach it that way, we get a huge response. And
Yeah.
AARP California has been one of the leaders in the country doing this, but other states are starting to do it now
Yeah, as
too.
well. Yeah.
And that's the way that we do it. We don't always put up front the thing that people disagree about. We
Yeah.
put up front the thing that people want to
Agree.
do.
Yeah.
That's the key
Yeah.
to good advertising.
For
And
sure.
by the
And
way, I'm a big believer in good advertising. I
yeah.
used to be, you don't know this, but I used to be on the advisory board of the Advertising Council of the United States. And those are the people who brought you the United Negro College Fund. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. They invented the idea of Smokey the Bear. People
Wow.
who did this were advertising executives.
Yeah.
They are potential allies too.
Yeah.
So always look for allies. Don't
Yeah.
look for enemies. You'll get your enemies anyway, but look
Yeah.
for allies. That's
No,
my
and I think what you were saying there about, advertising and the media and shaping this narrative, I think it's also part of what you've done in terms of like climate literacy and creating that newsletter and
yes.
really taking that and promoting it to as many people as possible. I think it goes back to how can one make a difference, but just that one newsletter, if you're able to increase like the click up rate and have as many people as possible get
That's
direct access.
that's what we're doing. I'm going to be working with a colleague of mine, Art Johnson, who's created a whole YouTube channel on unretirement
Yeah.
because we can't waste. You talk about, recycling. We
Yeah.
have to be recycling people,
Yeah.
not just recycling products.
Yeah.
And people like me, I'm no longer working in gerontology. I'm working on climate action.
Yeah.
Even though I'm 79 years old and I only started on it 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not too late and you're not too old.
Yeah.
Recycle yourself. That, that's my motto.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing mission. I guess like one more thing I sort of want to focus on is I know that, you're a part of, so many different groups and it's all about promoting awareness and reaching as many people
Right.
as possible. And I think a big part of that is also, in the education industry, in the education field, a lot of times in schools, when we're looking at, the education being taught, there's not as much of a focus on climate in terms of it being like a mandatory course or like a mandatory field. And that in some ways it sort of shapes perceptions going forward of is this an issue or not? So do you sort of see any way for us to, transition into the education sector with more of an emphasis on policy, on climate, and really emphasizing that in our
I
curriculum.
do. I do. And I will tell you this, many people don't know that um, Third Act, for example, which is a great organization. I mentioned Bill McKibben.
Yeah,
They have a whole division of people who are educators.
yeah,
Uh, they have a whole division of people who come from faith communities,
yeah,
another one for lawyers, another one for et cetera, because they have
Yeah.
thousands of people. Well, I encourage people to connect with Third Act. And if it turns out that they are a retired school teacher, they're
Yeah.
going to have ideas about how to connect with their local district, their
There.
local
Yeah.
area.
Yeah. Mm,
Retired professors like
mm,
me, they're going
yeah.
to be aware of how to connect with people who will be interested in their publications.
Yeah.
Mentioned I have a book called Climate Change in an Aging Society. It's
Mm,
not just a newsletter, it's a book that
yeah.
will appear this year, 2024.
Yeah.
And again, we hope to see that in college classrooms. We
Mhm.
want to see people at all ages get involved in this,
Yeah.
at all ages, connect with the elders and the youth, connect with each other, and we want them to work together. And
Yeah.
it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already
Already.
happening.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about like your book, the that's going to come out soon, and like when is it scheduled?
The book is very simple. It says I can summarize the book in 4 words. Are you
Yeah.
ready for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Here, now, you hope.
Wow.
That's it.
That says so
Here,
much.
now, you hope. That's
Yeah.
climate. Okay.
Yeah.
Climate is already here. It's not some other country.
Yeah.
Your family is from Mumbai.
Yeah.
In India, they've had tremendous heat waves. Guess what? We're having heat waves in the USA today. Okay.
Yeah.
Here, it's now. It's not just the future.
Yeah.
It's not just the year in 2054. It's the year in 2024.
Exactly.
Now, you. It
Yeah.
affects you, whether you're living in North Dakota or California or
Yeah.
Florida, Texas, I mentioned.
Yeah.
And finally, the last one, hope. What is hope? Hope is not thinking somehow things will work out.
Benefit. Yeah.
They'll invent something. That's not hope.
Yeah.
That's a wish list.
Yeah. For
At
sure.
Christmas time or your birthday. You
Yeah.
can have a wish list. I have a wish list about climate too.
Yeah.
But David Orr, a great environmentalist, once said, "Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up."
Wow.
Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. I should roll up my sleeves right now, okay? But it doesn't mean it's a metaphor. It means you should act in some way, just as you would if like I'm rolling up my sleeves now.
Yeah.
You should act. You could figure out what you can do, in Cupertino, what I can do in San Mateo. I
Yeah.
testify to the city council. I talk
Wow.
to my neighbors.
Yeah.
I try to connect with young people.
Yeah. For
Don't
sure.
wait for the future.
Yeah.
Here, now, you hope. That's what the book
Wow.
is all about. And
That's an amazing summary. Yeah. And I think it holds so much relevance with just those 4 words, how you're able to shape like a whole story, right? And like where we are, where we need to go, and how we can get there with hope. So I think that's really amazing.
our viewers can look me up on YouTube and
Yeah.
on you can go on Google, and if you type in climate action or climate and aging,
Yeah.
you find Harry Moody, and you'll find a website in which people can get my newsletter. It's
Yeah.
free. I'm not selling anything. I'm not even selling my book. I never even mentioned my book. My goal is to get people engaged, get them
Yeah.
involved, whether
Yeah.
they're young, old, or midlife, doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
All our viewers, please go and do that. And yeah, I guess, it's been amazing talking to you. Maybe just like a few more questions I want to
Sure,
get your
sure.
guidance on. It's been like amazing. So I know we were talking in the beginning of our conversation as well, about the circular economy. And one idea that, I wanted to talk to you about was this idea of like an eco point I was thinking about, where essentially it's sort of like of like a transaction or a way of you getting some sort of a reward for participating in something climate related, environmental related. And essentially what the goal would be is, let's say, you're going to a company like Starbucks, and on that day you bring your thermos instead of using a disposable cup that you have, right? And because that day you save a plastic cup, you get some sort of eco points. Or let's say you go for a ride sharing company instead, you're carpooling with people, there you get eco points. When you're going on Uber, you're saving gasoline from emitting into the air, you get an eco point. So that's sort of how it would work in terms of you being able to build up that eco points profile. And in many ways, it coming of value in society, right? I mean, today, obviously, we've seen the popularization of like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and those sorts of forms of trading and exchanging. But do you sort of see a rise for like an environmental sort of way of trading and bargaining to create.
I think so. I think so, but I would caution on whether or not it can be translated into cash very quickly.
Yeah,
And but I think there's other ways, like for example, if you were talking about Starbucks, or if you were talking about a book club or things like that,
yeah,
if you could encourage those companies to celebrate the actions that are already happening, like you gave the example of bringing the thermos bottle.
yeah,
I used to work with an organization called Elder Hostel,
yeah,
which is now called Rhodes Scholar. It's the world's
yeah,
largest education travel program.
yeah,
We used to give out points to people as frequent hostelers.
yeah,
People didn't get anything in return for it. It wasn't like American Airlines. You can get
uh-huh,
a payback, but
yeah,
they just loved the idea of keeping a record of all their good things and
yeah,
having it be publicized. And I
exactly.
think that, back to advertising again, I think that businesses can collaborate on
Mm,
this and celebrate the things that they're already doing.
yeah,
I'd like to see that. And I want you to send me a message after this Zoom call, and I will publicize your idea, because you are the young people and you are
yeah,
the future and you are the new
yeah,
ideas. And we,
awesome.
the old people, need the young people and we need
Awesome.
those
Yeah.
ideas. So
Thank you
thank
so much, Rick, for all your motivation, all your advice to all our young viewers out there watching as well. It's absolutely amazing, like what you're doing in terms of bridging the gap and spreading awareness. And I think what also people have to understand when we're thinking about climate is it's like a very sort of unique problem in that I was listening to people talking about it. It's like it's not like any other problem we've seen before, right? Because to solve it requires a togetherness, and everyone really has to join in and come together. And it's not like other problems, that we see in the news where really everyone is a part of it because this is our earth. But climate has a way of doing that, and it can be viewed in a positive light as well. It doesn't need to be negative because of the
that's
positive aspect is,
that's
we,
That's the key, Aryan. That's exactly what you've said. Peter Drucker, a great management consultant who I admired, I never knew him personally, but
yeah,
I read his work. He said it this way. He said, feed the opportunities, starve the problems.
yeah,
You're not going to deny the problems,
yeah.
but you're going to feed the opportunities.
Yeah,
That's where your energy,
yeah.
that's where your attention must
Do
be.
what you can, not what you can, right? You were
Do
saying.
what you can, not what you can't. You've said it
Exactly.
well, and I thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rick. Do you have maybe any other like last words, tips of advice for aspiring youth and how they can get to a position that you are in terms of advocacy and reaching people? Like, how do they get to where you are today?
Never doubt. I have a sweatshirt that I should be wearing today that says, I thought growing old would take longer.
Yeah,
Well, guess what? You too can become old and you too can contribute, and
perfect.
you're not too old and it's not too late. That's
Yeah.
my message.
The four words of the book as well. Awesome.
Here, now, you hope. You got it.
Exactly. Awesome.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much,
Aryan.
Rick,
Aryan.
for
Thank you.
joining us. Thank you so much to our viewers. It's been
Okay,
amazing. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank
very
you
good.
so much.
Thank you. Bye bye now.